And a disturbing story that we are learning more about today, coming out of Egypt. A young Coptic Christian girl was shot dead on her way home from a Bible study class. Her killers apparently targeting her because of her religion. And we're seeing more and more of this kind of attack against Christians in Egypt. She was 10 years old. And she's just one of the latest victims of the chaos that has gripped that country after the army removed former President Mohamed Morsi and his Muslim Brotherhood backers from power. In the aftermath, some of their supporters have targeted Egypt's Coptic Christian community, blaming them, among others, for Morsi's fall. Lisa Daftari is a Mideast journalist and a Fox News contributor. Lisa, welcome. Good to have you here. Such a sad story about this 10-year-old girl, and she really is becoming symbolic in some ways of a deeper attack that's going on, a physical, violent attack and killing against Christians in Egypt.
Right, absolutely. And since, Christian persecution has been commonplace in Egypt, being a predominantly Muslim country, but just since Morsi's 1 year in power, and more so since the June 30th uprisings in Egypt, we've seen a surge of attacks against Christians living in that country. It's not a safe place for them anymore. 7 Coptic Christians have been killed since, this young girl being one of them. A priest was killed, another merchant was kidnapped from his shop and unfortunately killed. We've seen churches being burnt down, businesses being looted, and the Muslim Brotherhood has been very clear that they're not going to back down anytime soon, and in the meantime they're going to take action against local civilians, and obviously the Christians being a target of that. And this whole thing about blaming the Christians for the ousting of Morsi, there's hardly, 10% of the Egyptian population is hardly Christian. So even if every single Christian in that country was out into the streets,
they wouldn't have been able to pull it off.
Right.
I was reading from quotes from her mother, this little girl's mother, and she, of course, is heartbroken. She said her daughter was the center of their lives. She was their future. She and her husband had talked about their concerns about safety in Egypt, but they had decided this is our home, this is where we're going to stay. And she was on her way home from a Bible study class, according to these reports.
And this is the common thing that you hear from a lot of Christians that I speak to in Egypt, where they know that they're not safe. They know that they're targeted, but at the same time, they're Egyptian. That's their culture. And another thing that's actually very telling about the people coming out into the streets, they were protesting side by side, Christians and Muslims. There is a unity there against Morsi, against the Muslim Brotherhood, against these radical.
That's a great point, and that's one of the things that I'm wondering here. If in this violence and this devastation for this family, there might be a kernel of something that brings together Muslims and Christians who want to live in a democratic environment in Egypt, and perhaps this girl's death in some way down the road inspires them to get together.
Right, and it's extremely symbolic in that way. There's a one-to-one correlation across the region. And again, let's look at the broader picture here, where as you see an increase in the radicalism, the extremism, and in those influences, you see an increase in Christian persecution, and that's across the board. We're seeing that in so many Middle Eastern countries and in North Africa as well. So, the silver lining, if you will, of this story is that the people of the country, 85 million strong, are becoming united in that they want the future of Egypt to have a more secular, a more united approach, and to have them living side by side.
You think back to the beginning of the Arab Spring and the support that the administration and the president and so many others had for the freedom fighters who wanted to have democracy. So now we've gone through this very difficult period. How helpful would it be? How much would the Egyptian people want the president and America to stand up and say, do not kill Christians in the street, do not, persecute these people, we support them and their plea and desire for real democracy?
And as witnesses of this Arab Spring and its aftermath, we failed in that way, and we've failed the people of Egypt, who are now mad at us for everything, because when they came out into the streets, we asked Mubarak to step down. We didn't support the people. Morsi came, we wanted to cozy up to the Muslim Brotherhood. So at every turn, the Egyptian people feel as though we've turned our backs on them. And this is the time. This is such an organic, grassroots, very pure movement where we're actually seeing the Christians are taking a stake in their country. They went onto the streets because they believe in the future of Egypt. We're seeing the Muslims protesting side by side the Christians and wanting to live with them in peace and having this Egyptian country for all. And this would be the time for America to step up.
Was, democratically elected, but obviously they don't care about the concerns of these Christian people as part of that democracy because they're killing them in the street.
And these radical influences can only grow unless we step up and we actually put a stop to these growing influences.
Lisa, thank you very much. Such a sad story, and your heart goes out to this little girl and her family and what is happening there. Many thanks. We'll see you soon.